Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room. I'm Robin Adair. With me, as always, the co-host with the most, John Juricic. And
Here I am.
John, you used to be in the financial markets. You were a stockbroker a long time ago, and it seems that we don't have time to get into all the important political things that are going on in this world because we've got this crazy Donald Trump situation. And the latest chapter is, I would say, one of the craziest.
Yeah.
We've just had Trump arbitrarily bring all of these tariffs worldwide, the world's shaking, and the saber rattling going on, and then suddenly, after the market just tanks, and all of these economists are saying we're heading to a recession, thousands of jobs at risk. Suddenly, Trump says, "Oh well, we're going to take 90 days and give countries a chance to come and negotiate." We've got a lineup of countries ready to come because they all recognize that this is going to be a great deal, and have you ever seen anything like this in your life?
Oh, I don't even know where to start. Okay, there's a very famous market commentator on MSNBC. His name is Jim Cramer. He was around when I was a stockbroker. Hey, I had hair. I was thin,
Those were the days, eh?
Those were the days, baby. And Jim Cramer would always get really angry. That was his signature style. Angry. I'm angry. Okay, have I seen market instability? Have I seen markets collapse? I have, 5 times in my career. But have I ever seen markets change and markets base their decision making on the whim of a man's intuition? Everything we do in life is based on some sort of evaluation and analysis and objective thinking and planning. That's how humans do stuff. We don't run the strongest countries in the world on a whim, which means, Robin, that he might have another whim on Friday, and he might have another whim on Monday. I don't think this is going to go for 90 days. It is ridiculous crap. Now, therefore, we sought out someone who does make their analysis on objectivity and facts and logic. Coming up in a few minutes, we'll talk to senior financial advisor David Schneider, who says this correction is the biggest event in his professional experience. Correction down, correction up, correction sideways. Where do the markets go? And that's what and what's the answer from the White House? We'll speak to David in a few minutes.
But first, we're going to go closer to home, our home and native land. And Mark Carney, the Liberal, still leading in the polls, although the Conservatives are catching up a little bit. It's getting tighter and tighter. But David Carney says, I spoke to Trump. We've agreed that as soon as this election's over, presumably the Liberals winning, we will negotiate. We will negotiate a fair deal. And in the meantime, Carney has been riding on the crest of convincing people that he is the man who can stand up to Donald Trump. And you can hear it in the way he delivers his speech.
Who's ready to stand up for Canada? Who's ready? Who's ready to help Bill Blair and the Liberal Party win the most consequential election in our lifetimes? And we need to win this election because of what's at stake. What's at stake? This week, the United States imposed massive tariffs on the world, but not Canada this time. But that only meant, keep it going. I'm going to build you up. That only meant that this week we got the best of a series of bad deals for every country in the world. It's a grave moment for the global economy. The U.S. left in place, though, 3 other sets of tariffs that President Trump put in place, including on our auto industry, on our steel industry, and on our aluminum industry, threatening.
Robin, as you know, as our viewers know, I'm involved with internet marketing. I'm involved with digital marketing. And a key sort of foundation to that is that really the viewer or the listener pays attention to the last thing they saw or the minute of information that they get. short. I'm going to be disappointed if that's how Canadians choose to vote in this upcoming election and choose the last month or two as the basis for what they're doing. And it might happen, and it might be reflective of what we're doing. Nonetheless, strategically, aside from seats in BC, the NDP is irrelevant. Conservatives are still attempting to gain their footing. They're still drawing huge crowds across the country. I mean, really, startlingly huge crowds. But Pierre Poilievre sounds like he still wants to talk about the economy more than he wants to talk about Donald Trump. Is this going to work, or is this going to backfire on him?
We've made it very clear that we are the only party that has a plan to take back control of our economic future, build a new economic fortress that is strong enough to resist any interference or tariffs from the Americans, that allows Canadians to make their own stuff, trade with each other, build homes for their youth, and restore our strength to stand on our own 2 feet and stand up against the Americans.
So we've heard from the two leaders, we've heard from the guys who want to be prime minister, and we are looking at polling. And polling seems to be fairly uniform that the Liberals hold a lead. Some show it's tighter, some show a comfortable lead for the Liberals at this point. The new Main Street poll is interesting. Liberals, 42%. They're down 0.9%. The Conservatives at 40.4%. So basically a 4-point margin, which still gives the Liberals a majority government. NDP way back at 6.9%. The Bloc at 3.8%. Some talk that the Bloc won't win a single seat this time. That'd be something else, and most of those seats, I suspect, would go to the Liberals. The People's Party, Green Party aren't really factors here. So if these numbers hold, John, it's going to be a majority Liberal government, but we'll have to wait for the debates. First one in French, the second one in English, both of them in Montreal, the English one on the 18th. And Johnny, it's interesting to see what the Rumble Rumor viewers have to say about what's going on in our federal race.
Thousands of them. There are thousands of comments. And Gary certainly isn't a conservative fan. I find some of this stuff hard to read. He writes to us, I've been doing some research on Pierre Poilievre. He's a pretty crappy person. He's publicly stated that he will defund the CBC and says Canada's Aboriginals need to learn the value of hard work, more than they need compensation for abuse in residential schools.
Mind you, there are people out there, John, who simply don't trust the Liberals. Giles had this to say, the million-dollar question is, why would anyone trust a banker, especially one who's made a career in the most powerful financial institutions in the world?
And Rick writes, Trump will be the least of our troubles if Carney gets in.
While Jennifer strongly counters this by saying, there's a lot of truly delusional and misinformed people here. They've clearly drunk the Pierre Poilievre grape juice. Sad and scary. I do think that Donald Trump presents a clear and present danger to the country, and the Conservatives need to take a more direct route. They need to attack him directly and show that they will stand up against Donald Trump. They don't seem to want to go after him like the Liberals are doing and making this into a Team Canada, us and them situation. They want to negotiate with Trump. And I think the public's distrustful of all that a little bit. They worry that the Conservatives won't be as tough with Trump as Carney would be. And I have serious doubts right now about, how this is all going to unfold. But John, let's move back now to the other big story. Hard to believe there could be two big things like this happening simultaneously, but we have this little matter of the stock market.
Right. And it used to be huge national, strongest country in the world, economic and political policy is actually being done on Twitter and Truth Social. And we just wait every couple hours to see what direction we're going in. And that is difficult for policymakers to figure out how to react to that. However, the stock market certainly has. And as we mentioned earlier, David Schneider is a regular contributor to the Rumble Room. And again, is joining us to talk about the business landscape. we still don't know much about further tariffs in Canada, and we don't know how negotiations will be conducted to settle this mess. But David Schneider is a senior investment advisor who truly knows his stuff and has been around the block. So let's zoom him in. Well, joining us once again is Victoria Senior Financial Planner David Schneider. Welcome back, David.
Good to be back, gentlemen, on this day in April. Sunny day in April.
Tough markets. Okay. Instant analysis from Liberation Day in the States indicates that we should all be breathing a sigh of relief about Trump not punishing Canada with a second round of across-the-board tariffs. However, David, explain to us in simple terms, if you can, if anybody can, what has really unfolded with this tariff war.
First of all, you should always remember you can never figure out what Trump is up to, but looks like we're getting a pivot where, as opposed to attacking Mexico and Canada, he's going after Asia and Europe. So big change. We probably wanted to get a lot more benefit in Canada this week when the news came out, but at the same time, OPEC decided to increase production like crazy, so oil's down $5. But he's really going after the countries that have the biggest tariffs on the United States. And it's interesting, from Vietnam to China to a lot of Asian countries and a lot of European countries, it's significant. And now the market is showing that they're worried about a big global slowdown. And that's why the bond market is going up, meaning rates are coming down, because they really see a slowdown, because there's all of a sudden so much decisions that aren't going to be made, because it's really tough to plan when you have this kind of change going on. So Trump is going after countries, but all of a sudden, you're going to start seeing countries going back to Trump and say, let's negotiate, let's talk. And it's interesting, the Australians that really didn't have any sort of retaliatory efforts against the United States, they've been left out of the equation, basically. So many other countries have done so. Israel actually this week said no tariffs to the United States. So those that retaliate, I think, are going to get hit the most. So we'll see what happens, but the market doesn't like uncertainty, and we sure see it right now.
So I understand that a lot of money has evaporated through all of this. That we've lost something like $3 trillion on the Dow Jones since Trump became president. And
Right.
I mean, I realize money in some ways is almost theoretical when you get to those kinds of numbers. But I also would suggest that real people at the end get hurt and businesses close and a lot of things can become tough. Trump has been promising that this is supposed to bring business back to the United States and jobs, and it's going to make everything better in the United States. What do you think of this whole strategy of tariffs? It seems to me a lot of economists don't like the idea, but Trump doesn't care.
Trump doesn't care, and also retaliatory tariffs have shown ever since the Great Depression they don't work. It causes even more pain. Viewers should know that Trump really has probably three real big strategies on why he's doing things. One, they got $9 trillion of debt coming up. They needed to get interest rates down. Borrowing costs were going through the roof. And whether it was Niall Ferguson, whether it's Louis Vincent Gabe, it was Jim Thorne, they all said the same thing about a month ago. When interest costs became more than military spending, there was a major issue. So he's working on three things. One, interest rates costs are coming down, and they are. Energy costs, he wants to become a super energy producer, and he also wants energy costs to come down, especially for the Rust Belt. So he wants energy costs to come down for the U.S. consumer and the U.S. manufacturing sector. And he also wants the currency to come down, which helps. And he's actually accomplished all those three things right now, even though he doesn't feel it. And he wants to become a superpower. And I think that was the behind the scenes moves. There wasn't much happening with Canada because he knows how valuable Canada is to his superpower strategy, especially our oil sands. Nothing touches our oil sands in Alberta. They're long-term assets, access to the United States. And I think it's key. And I don't think a lot of viewers want to hear this, but actually Daniel Smith behind the scenes actually was very instrumental in that. So it's interesting how it wasn't touched. And we'll see what happens. But, he scared Mexico. He scared Canada. He used the fentanyl issue as a bit of a wrapper, where in Canada it was It was really the Chinese that are so into our economy, our banking system, our voting system. He's provided some warning signals. So it was interesting. He let us off, but he sure went after Europe and sure went after Asia. And the market is really uncertain right now, and that's why we have a sell-off.
All right, let's talk about a subject dear to your heart. Let's talk about pipelines and energy. Okay, Poilievre wants them, and he wants an energy corridor. Actually, most Canadians now do. Carney's removed the carbon tax, still plans to put emission taxes on business. He's making some noise that's not entirely bullish on pipelines. What do you think will happen to Canada's energy sector if Carney happens to win this upcoming election?
Well, I think it's fair to say that you'll see Alberta and maybe Saskatchewan hooking up at Alberta, talking the let's get out of Canada movement. It's going to happen quite quickly. She's already made some comments about that. There's even been comments about Quebec and Alberta kind of working together, that they both work on their own strategies of getting out. But I don't understand it. Here we have the former chair of Brookfield, their company just buying some pipelines, and he does the Bill 69. I don't get it, but as you know, the Liberal propaganda machine, they know how to work the crowd, they know how to work voters. I don't get it. And, the energy sector is the only thing that we have that can really get out of our financial mess. I want to give you a statistic that as of 2019, government income coming in, 4.9% of that intake went to interest costs. Now it's over 24% of our government intake goes into interest costs. We can't afford things. And the only thing that we can get out of this mess is responsible resource development with natural gas, oil production, LNG. It's interesting, on the coast, the first ship I think is arriving, maybe it was yesterday or today, that's arrived on the coast up north on the coastline. So it's a real interesting one. And I didn't understand his Bill 69, but Brian Lee Crowley sat down with Stuart Muir this past week in Newfoundland, and he used the term, our most incredible endowment asset is our resources. It's in the ground. It can't be offshored. We can do it responsibly, and our technical expertise that we have in the energy sector is second to none, that we sell around the world too. So I don't get it, but look at BC. We've had our fourth credit downgrade, $12 billion deficit. The only way we can get out of this is responsible resource development. And I was appalled a couple of weeks ago at the major conference in Houston. We were the only major jurisdiction in all of North America that didn't have one representative from their government at the conference. It was pretty sad, actually.
Well, although there is a lot of anti-American feeling in this country right now, and it's, I think, kind of tough to get Canadians rallying about goodwill about sitting down at tables with the Americans. Maybe that'll change now. We'll see. But David, I'm curious to know your feelings about the pulse of the Canadian public and the voter right now. I was watching CBC coverage of the I guess, taming of Donald Trump in regards to coming down with a hammer on Canada with these tariffs. He's still got tariffs on Canada with the steel and aluminum, and he's got parts, and he's talking about going after our lumber later too. So it's not like we're out of the woods, but it's not as bad as we thought. And I almost saw tearful CBC reporting where they were so grateful to Mark Carney for going to the limit and having a chat with Donald Trump, and then Trump backs off on this. So this is a huge feather in Carney's cap. Well, personally, I think that this was going to happen anyway, and that it could have as easily been Poilievre who made that call. I don't think Mark Carney is the reason that Trump has backed off. And I want to know what your feelings are about the flavor of the election now, because it seems to me that Trump has sucked the oxygen out of the room in terms of the election. But now that suddenly things are not as dire, it's not the end of Canada. We're not going to have 25% tariffs. We're not in a massive trade war. There's room for negotiation. Are we going to move back to the other big issues, as in immigration, as in crime, as in industrial sector and energy, all the things that basically are all in Pierre Poilievre's wheelhouse? Do you think that the election is still going to change focus before we get to election date at the end of April?
Oh, it has to. The jokes I received this week, as soon as the announcements came out, that the rug was pulled out of Carney. That his whole strategy was villain Trump. It used to be villain Pierre. Well, the tariffs are done now. There's no real negotiation. So I think it's going to get back to policy. I never underestimate the liberal machine, the liberal propaganda machine, and honestly, why your guys are so successful with your podcast. You come out with honest journalism. Look at what we have in Canada. You just see the mainstream media. There are some tough people. There are some good people like Brian Lilly. There's some, the lady on CTV comes up with good questions, but generally you see this love and affair for Mr. Carney. You can't fight it. The
CBC's afraid of the closure. They're all afraid they're going to lose their jobs if the Conservatives win, right?
Yeah, it's so biased, and let's not pretend anymore. Like I would get an email saying, Schneider, guess what? It was 9-1 this story. What do you mean? 9 Carney, 1. So there's all these people analyzing it. So I think it is a boomer versus a non-boomer election and the platform. I was really surprised. On my LinkedIn page, there was a National Post article I shared 2 days ago about, there's no problems to you if you're a boomer. But if you're not a boomer, you're feeling pain. It was a really well put together article by Mr. Koch, and my email.
Oh, come on, you two! I can't believe what I'm hearing. You know what?
LinkedIn, it exploded.
Listen, David. Look, conservatives have as much capacity and as much intelligence and experience to counter any kind of propaganda. They don't have to go through CBC to win the information wars, just like Trump didn't have to go through the mainstream media to win an election down south. There's lots of capacity to get good messaging out. For example, this pipeline stuff, every single Canadian in the world wants these pipelines to be working. Well, why is he hammering Carney on this daily? Are you going to build pipeline? Like, boom, boom, boom. Like, sometimes, they got to look at their own communication strategies as well.
Oh, I know. It's tough. It is communication, but we'll see what happens. You see that Danielle went on with Ben Shapiro. There was a lot of mixed reviews about that, whether she should. The news recently that Pierre's going to go on with Joe Rogan. You're right. The Trump campaign ended up going right to social media. They didn't go to mainstream media. All they did was podcasts. And look what happened.
Yeah, so there is a way to bypass. But anyway, that's political strategy, and we're asking, and here I am. So sorry to bring you into that swamp, but let me go into some economic strategy with you, and maybe chat now here about the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room being the Chinese. Tell me how you feel the Chinese will respond to these Trump maneuvers on tariffs and protectionism. Think they'll be able to expand their influence and economic power across the world as the Americans pull out?
Yeah, I think the big issue is China versus the United States, and Canada's been caught in it. Canada was, we've been reminded the last 2 months, there's some things that we need to clean up, and I think Canada as a whole has been cleaning up. They got the message. It can't happen overnight. But my military guys, the stuff building up around Taiwan, like it's building, and I think there's a lot of worries that there's going to be an escalation going on. But also, there's worries in the market that does the Chinese devalue their currency? That's a big issue right now that could really cause even more havoc. We'll see what comes in the next coming days and weeks.
David, sorry, I don't understand why that would be beneficial. Help my layman mind get that, please.
Well, the U.S. is trying to devalue and get their currency down to make their trade. But then all of a sudden, if the Chinese values their currency, their products will be that much cheaper. Okay. So,
thank you.
So it's a real game going on. And yeah, it's China versus U.S. That's the gold medal game going on right now. We're caught in between. We are cleaning ourselves up. And it's really interesting. You see the media reports. Sam Cooper's doing an outstanding job. What's going on here in BC? When the tariffs came from China, none of the politicians wanted to touch it. No one talks about China tariffs. They only talk about U.S. tariffs. You just wonder how many are compromised, John. Like it's scary.
We'll be keeping a very close eye, of course, on all things stock market, all things election, as the shows continue with all kinds of great details and great information on the Rumble Room. It's quite a news cycle. And John, before we say goodbye, I want to pay tribute to somebody who's a very long-term colleague and friend of mine who sadly passed away at the age of 68. I'm speaking about Rick Weirtz. And Rick Weirtz was my news director back in the late 80s and 90s. Myself and many other people that work with Rick found that he was extremely collaborative, and he also empowered us to do a lot of things. I moved out of sports under Rick, went into news, and went into working at the legislature as a legislative reporter. Later, we did talk show radio together. We worked on conferences. We did media training, and we remained friends. Rick is, of course, a guy who is very, very widely liked in the community. He is survived by a wife and 3 daughters and a very close-knit family, and my sympathies go to the family and all who knew Rick Weirtz.
You and I have both had occasion to know Rick and to work with Rick. He actually worked for me at eTraffic Solutions as sales manager for a couple of years. And then, interestingly enough, you know how we talk about our chamber ecosystem, both you and I were chairs. Well, I actually didn't want to be chair in those years, early 2000s. And it was Rick Weirtz who phoned me and said, I think he was on the chamber board, and he said, John, we would like you to be chair. And he convinced me to run and eventually become chair at 09. So that's a very direct input. And, you know, he passed, as you've indicated, far too young. Sincerest condolences to his family, and we'll forever miss him.
And I guess on that note, John, just a reminder to people that there are a number of ways they can watch the Rumble Room, as we are on numerous platforms. And we also have a website, which we're very excited about. And we hope that you'll watch the Rumble Room and stay with us on a regular basis. I'm Robin Adair, and
I'm the Croatian sensation today.
And we very much suggest that you continue to rumble on.